So when you think of fast SUVs, you think big brakes, loud noises, and according to Volvo, one of these, power plug. This right here is the plug-in hybrid XC60 T8 Polestar engineered. It's a big mouthful, but this badge right here means it is the sportiest XC60 money can buy. This is competing against things like the X3 M40i, the Mercedes-AMG GLC 43, and the Audi SQ5. So we're going to take it for a spin and see whether the plug-in hybrid drivetrain really delivers on its promises. If you haven't got much time, I have a 1-minute overview of the XC60 coming right up, or you can skip ahead to the section of the review you want to see. Otherwise, stay right where you are to watch the entire thing.
Priced from just under $100,000 and replacing the T8R design, the Volvo XC60 T8 Polestar engineering is Volvo's flagship mid-size performance SUV. Featuring 311 kilowatts of power and 670 newton meters of torque, it shoots to 100 kilometers an hour from standstill in just 5.2 seconds. All of that punch comes from a 2-litre turbocharged and supercharged 4-cylinder petrol engine that's mated to an electric motor. The petrol engine powers the front axle, while the electric motor powers the rear. Bespoke Öhlins suspension is fully adjustable front and rear and isn't dissimilar to systems found on race cars. And stopping power comes from monster 6-piston Akebono brakes. Under the steed of electric power alone, the 10.4 kilowatt-hour battery allows this plug-in hybrid to travel around 45 kilometers without using a sip of fuel. The XC60 T8 Polestar engineering is mighty quick in a straight line but lacks a bit of compliance through the bends. It's not as planted as an X3M, nor is it as fast. It also lacks a bit of oral appeal and suffers from suspension that can be firm at times. But if it's an incredibly efficient family hauler with punch that you're after, this could be the Volvo for you. Stay right where you are for the rest of our review.
Your Polestar engineering fix is going to cost you just under $100,000, and you'll be able to tell this car, aside from others in traffic thanks to these big wheels, 21 inches. You can go 22 for the full gangster look, but I reckon that's going to ruin the ride. Akebono brakes, 6-piston calipers up the front with cross drilling. They are mammoth and yellow, but my favourite part is under the bonnet. Have a look at this. Volvo isn't mucking about here, because right here you have technology that you're going to find on a race car, not a family SUV. Up the top is a strut tower brace. That keeps the body nice and rigid as it's cornering. So as the body flexes, that prevents that flex and keeps everything nice and taut. But it's this here that really stands out. It's the Öhlins suspension system. Using these knobs on top of the suspension arms, you can adjust the amount of flow rate you get in the damper. And that means you can adjust whether it's stiff or whether it's soft, and that will allow you to play with settings if you ever do take this to a racetrack. I know it's highly unlikely, but the suspension here is unique in this segment, and it's a really cool setup. The only downside is you can't make any adjustments on the fly. The car has to be stopped. You need to be physically under the bonnet changing things. That is in comparison to a lot of the other cars in this segment that have adaptive dampers that you adjust from inside the cabin. Anyway, let's go for a spin, because I'm keen to see how the plug-in hybrid system interacts with the turbocharged and supercharged petrol engine. Before we get into how this drives when you pick up the pace a little bit, let's have a look at the plug-in hybrid drivetrain. You've got a 10.4 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. It's good for around 45 kilometers of driving range on full electric, and that's what we're doing right now. There's this cool little meter in front of the driver that tells you how hard you can push the throttle before the petrol engine kicks on, and before then you are driving entirely on electric. And then it also means you can charge it using an AC power plug at home, and that charge only takes a few hours just to get the car full and giving you that driving range. Most people drive less than 30 k's a day to and from work, so it is the optimum amount of petrol-free driving. Volvo's done this setup with the hybrid drivetrain slightly differently. Instead of using a power-boosted system that runs across both axles, Volvo has the petrol engine dedicated to the front axle and the electric motor dedicated to the rear. Then the driver is able to select different driving modes using this little switch here. You press that, it allows you to switch to constant all-wheel drive, where you've got torque running to both axles at the same time. You've then got pure, which is full eco hybrid mode, so that is full electric. Then you've also got the option to go down to hybrid, which is the car deciding when it needs to pick up the hybrid engine and then when it needs to pick up the petrol engine. Then you have Polestar engineered. That is when systems are all in attack mode and this thing turns into a bit of a feral monster. Fuel consumption is a pretty neat 2.2 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle. That's using a mix of both of those drivetrains, or it'll just be 0 if you just use the electric motor the entire time. So enough of that, let's flick over to Polestar engineered. You get the engine fire up, you get the gauge in front of you switch to an RPM gauge, and everything just gets a whole lot livelier. You can hear a slight bit of whine there from the supercharger, which I reckon is really cool. Kind of has that hint of a V8 overtone. You get stuck into that throttle. It actually pushes you back really nicely. 311 kilowatts of power, 670 Newton meters of torque combined, and it sits nice and flat on the road here. Uses a set of Pirelli P0 treads. They're 255 millimeter wide. They really just keep the car nice and planted on the road. And then when you need to stop on the anchors, the old T8 just threw you through the windscreen when you got on the brakes. The Bonnet brakes here are sensational. They really stand up to a good hammering, 6-piston calipers and some great feel through the brake pedal there as well. So how does it compare to something like an X3 M40i? Look, to be honest, it's not quite as sharp in terms of the steering feel. Steering feel's just a slight bit numb. It sometimes ignores your requests for gears if you start using the paddles. But if you do want to settle down here and use this as a family car, what's it like with the Olin suspension? Well, in a word, it's pretty firm. Yes, you can go and dial in all the soft settings there to make life a little easier, but to be honest, it's not something you're going to be able to do easily on the fly like you can in the competitors in this segment. You're going to have to stop the car, pop the bonnet, make your adjustments to the front and rear, and only then will you settle on what you need. The rest of the time, it's going to be a pretty firm ride. It's not quite as firm as the M40i, but you do lose the ability to adjust the ride there on the fly. In saying that though, you've got a cabin with excellent visibility. Volvo's renowned for their safety, and this car just feels nice and confident on the road. I mean, you would literally put your teenage kid in this car to go drive it around if you wanted to, because you know that it is safe and it has all the features you need. As you're driving along, you have safety tech such as a blind spot monitor. You've got a feature that will park in and park out of parking spaces. So even if you are in a tight space, it will get you out of there as well, which is often a struggle once it gets you into a really tight spot. You have rear cross traffic alert. You have autonomous emergency braking that can detect pedestrians and cyclists as well, and that works up to high speed too. Now, if this was 6 months ago, I would have told you not to bother buying this car unless you had extremely deep pockets, because Volvo in Australia, for some reason, they have notoriously expensive service packages, and even if you prepay for them, you just bleed from the pocket every time you go and get the car serviced. Volvo has listened to customer complaints and addressed that. So now they have packages that are capped, means you can go in, pay for your servicing up front and not get absolutely ripped off every time you go into that dealership. While mum or dad are going to be the ones that are always driving, the kids are the most important people here because SUV, so it's important that they're nice and comfy. Good news, Volvo has focused on making this a really nice environment to be seated. Even for an adult here, I've got heaps of knee room, lots of toe room and plenty of headroom as well. Up the top there, you've got that full glass roof that opens as well, so it looks really nice. Volvo's then gone and put a lot of creature comforts in here and also a lot of premium finishes. So have a look at this Bowers & Wilkins sound system. It's got a metal cover on there, door handles are metal. I love the seat belts, so the yellow seat belts signify Polestar engineered. Center armrest here, you've got a little tray there, plus a storage nook as well, and then it sits nice and high so you can be comfortable. There's no USB outlets in the back, so your kids won't be charging any of their devices. There's just a single 12-volt outlet. But have a look at this nifty feature right here. So it looks like a normal seat with ISOFIX built into it, but if you do have smaller kids and you want them to sit a little bit higher and they're not in a seat, that pops right up there. That'll support a kid up to 36 kilograms, and that means they're able to see out the side windows and they don't feel like they're boxed in. So this is a really innovative feature, and I'm glad to see that Volvo's still persisting with this stuff. In the boot there, you've got about 460 litres of cargo capacity. Beneath the cargo floor, you don't have a spare tyre. It's just a tyre repair kit, but it is fairly spacious. Now let's jump into the front there, where this cabin really takes a turn. Wow, these seats are so comfortable. Volvo does a great seat, and even better in these sports models. It just hugs you in so nicely. Then you've got a raft of controls to personalize it to your exact desire. Now, what about this interior? This car's now manufactured in China, so it is certainly different in the sense of where it's coming from. It is cheaper for Volvo to manufacture them, but it doesn't feel any cheaper inside the car. You still get those premium finishes, and it looks $1 million. This still feels like it should be double the price. It really does have that sort of luxury feel to it. You have storage all over the cabin here with these classy sort of metallic covers, and then a decent center console there as well. Only 2 USB ports in the entire cabin, which is a little bit disappointing. Volvo really could have stepped up the game there with some ports in the back and perhaps some USB-C as well. Over here in the glove box, it is pretty decent too, but it all centers around this screen. You've got a 9-inch portrait screen, which I'll run you through in just a second. Ahead of the driver is a heads-up display plus a 12.3-inch color screen. So that gives you your trip computer and the rest of the information critical to the car. This is a sports steering wheel as well, so you get your metallic paddle shifters. Sits nicely in the hand too. And then the rest of the cabin is all just straight Volvo. It's all very straightforward to use, and you get those yellow speakers behind the Bowers & Wilkins cover as well. Volvo spent a lot of time and energy into giving this system the love that it needs, and this features on a lot of Volvo products. It's a 9-inch screen. It is super high resolution, and it's super easy to use as well. I will point out immediately though that it has one downside, and that is that everything is on that screen. So when you're driving, it can be a little tedious to use some functions. So for example, the temperature. If I want to change the temperature while I'm driving, I'm looking ahead, I've got to slide this thing up and down, or I've got to do this. And that means taking my eyes off the road, which is a little bit frustrating, but the rest of it is fairly straightforward. Within the climate control menu, you can actually set preconditioning of the car, so it'll even heat the steering wheel for you at a set time as well, which is pretty cool. So that is a handy function there. This is your main screen. I'll get to that in a second, but before I do, have a look at these apps that you can install through the car. So there's FM and DAB plus digital radio. There's no AM, but you can access that through TuneIn Radio. That means you can download or listen to any radio station around the world. That includes all your AM stations. So if you're out of DAB range, you can get them through TuneIn. You've also got Spotify, Yelp, and a stack of other applications that you can add on to that screen. So it is a pretty immersive experience. 19-speaker Bowers & Wilkins sound system. It is an absolute cracker. And then you even have settings for a sound stage here, so you can effectively focus audio on different passengers. So it is a pretty impressive system there. You do have an owner's manual built into the screen as well. Once you access that, you're able to find certain elements of the car that you need help with, and that's all displayed through a fairly handy screen up the front there that lets you select the interior, exterior, and then you can focus on points of the car that you're having issues with. So for example here, the steering wheel, I want to find out a bit more about that. It'll then give me all the information I need. Now back on this main screen here, navigation, it's built into that little menu. You can expand it there, and then you can also make it 2D or 3D. In terms of entering destinations, Volvo's done a good job here because you can either type in points of interest, or you can come through and then write them on the screen. So we can do that.
Capital S. Capital P.
So it's a fairly handy feature, but it is much easier to just type it in, I reckon. But that works fairly well. You've also got voice recognition there that you can tell the car where you want it to go to call people, etc. That is a good working system as well. You've then got your DAB radio control. So here you can select from a litany of stations available to you. You can store your favorites and have them accessed through the shortcut buttons on the steering wheel. Telephone, this is all pretty straightforward. You can dial your contacts, you've got favorites there. You can swap to other phones in the car. There's Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all built into that screen. It's not wireless, which is an issue because you've only got 2 USB points there. So one is automatically taken if you do want to run CarPlay or Android Auto on the screen. And then finally, you've got all your sound system settings. You do have a secondary screen here as well that allows you to access functions of the plug-in hybrid system. So you can hold charge using the engine, and then you can enable or disable all of the safety features within the car as well, such as your blind spot monitoring, speed sign, assistance, and that kind of thing. But another handy feature is parking in and parking out. So parking in is obviously if you come to a perpendicular or parallel park, the car will get it in there for you. But parking out, if you've got yourself into a jam or someone has managed to get right up close to you and you're not too confident getting out, hit the park out button, flick the indicator switch, and it will then guide the car out of the parking space, which is a really cool feature. So that has been your first look at the 2020 Volvo T8 plug-in hybrid Polestar engineered It is a cracker of a car. It isn't quite as dynamic as the BMW X3, M40i, or even the X3M, nor is it as dynamic as something like a GLC 43. It feels more like an SQ5 competitor, and then it adds in that plug-in hybrid system that is extremely efficient, extremely quiet, and then gives you the mileage that you need to get this under the radar without costing you a fortune. To read more about the Volvo XC60, head to CarAdvice.com and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.